welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli, that's Bud Elliott, that's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson, coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate, one of our favorite off-season traditions. It's a good table setter for what's going to happen as we break down, some of the things we learn in spring over the course of April, as we start to get into win totals and our projections in June, July, and on into August. We want to look for the teams that could be poised either because of off-season changes or just the way that last season went. The teams that are poised for a big turnaround, taking a big step forward, increase in the win total. Maybe you're competing at a different level. We'll get into a bunch of those from all across the country coming up in a little bit. But we begin with certainly some headline-worthy news, especially given everyone involved. Deion Sanders, Colorado. Arch Manning rules might apply here as well. But NFL Hall of Famer Warren Sapp has joined the Colorado staff. Now, there's something that we need to be specific about here, which is Sapp's role. And the way that I understand it is that Warren Sapp, because, and Danny, I think I've got this right, he is enrolled in a graduate class so that he can be a graduate assistant, so he can actually work with the players. If Sapp was an analyst, he would not be allowed to work with the players. Star power is always something that Deion's going to try to bring to his program. What do you make of Sapp joining the Buffs?
Oh, this is absolutely right up Coach Prime's alley, right? Lean into fame, lean into branding, lean into professional athletes, his connections. I think it's a great job for him too. I do think this is probably a lot more about recruiting as well, or talent acquisition, or NIL, however you want to get players to Boulder. That brings more credibility to their staff. There's one massive unknown. We don't know if Warren Sapp can coach. We don't know that, but I don't think
he's got to at least be able to give you something. I mean, we're talking about one of the most gifted and skilled defensive linemen in modern football history.
Yeah.
There is a value there that is larger than what you would get with, a run-of-the-mill replacement level coach, I would think.
I would think so too, but we've seen historically great player. We've seen cases. Some former players are great at communicating fundamentals, technique, motivational tactics. They're great at it. Others we've seen struggle mightily. Like, they don't comprehend how come this player can't do what I can. And I think that's something that I think Deion Sanders struggles with that at times, when I think his expectation and being able to talk such a big game, he was always able to back it up. I'm sure it's frustrating that he talks a big game and his team didn't back it up last year. So I think that'll be these are unknowns. Maybe Sapp will be great. But I think as far as branding, I think he fits right in. And I do think he will bring an old school mentality to that team. And I think Deion deep down is old school. When you do talk about the way he coaches, he's hard on his players. I don't think he babies them. I don't think he coddles them. He's like, hey, you guys are making money. We better produce. And if you don't, I'm going to go find somebody else who will. I think Warren Sapp, culturally, I think he'll fit right in.
I mean, this is clearly the move that puts Colorado in the playoff. Right? Let's go back to what Deion said in January. This is on Undisputed. Last year, we were 7 points away from 7 to 8 more wins. We just didn't know how to win. We got our butts kicked twice. Several of those games we could have won. We could have definitely been a bowl team. We made noise, but now we're going to make some sounds. We can definitely make the playoff. I mean, he believes in this team. We all probably think that's crazy talk, but he really believes in this team. I mean, bringing more Hall of Famers in. And Danny, those silly points about Kenny Coach and what kind of effort we're going to get. Come on, man.
Man, you're about to bite your tongue off. That thing is so firmly planted in your cheek right now. I'm afraid you're going to lose it.
You know what? I've said what I wanted to say about Deion. I've got all my clips saved. I'm not going to bang on the guy every week. When what I said is going to happen does happen, I'm just going to pull him from last year. I don't need to reiterate my Deion take every time. I'll give a benefit of the doubt. They try to get in the transfer portal. He's doing some interesting things. A lot of very NFL influence on this staff. That could work. It could also bomb. I mean, we've seen very different outcomes from different programs trying the heavy NFL influence. I think it's kind of smart to stick Sapp in a GA role.
Right. I thought that part, I was like, oh, okay. That's at least some next level, trying to think about ways you could make the most out of this as possible. That did not seem like they were just trying to win the headline and get like a spot here on the Cover 3 podcast. Coach Prime, I know you're watching, shout out to you.
Do you believe?
But like, I know that at least required some thought from somebody in that program of ways that they could maximize Sapp's use.
It's also only something that can be done by somebody who's independently wealthy, right?
Yes.
Like normally, like if you have an actual family to take care of, you can't move and take a GA role unless your wife makes bank. Actually, Saban tried this with Al Groh like 15 years ago. Al Groh, who had been the head coach of the New York Jets, they were like, "Yeah, he's a graduate assistant at Alabama," and they're like, "No. Like you, there is a rule against doing it for somebody who's been in coaching for a certain amount of time." So they kind of closed that loophole. I don't think there's any rule against somebody who's played in the NFL but has not previously been a coach. So I'll give Deion a lot of credit. I think he really did a nice job with this.
Do we know what graduate class Warren's taking? That's what I want to know. I want to know.
You are in Warren Sapp's class. Please tell us. Like, is he actually on campus? There's no chance he's going to campus, right? Like, he's got to just be on the laptop.
I need to know you're just sitting there in your course, and then Warren Sapp walks in and sits at the little chair next to you with like a notebook and a laptop. Like,
we're gonna get a screenshot,
a pen
of like the discussion board.
What percentage?
Sapp, W, and his.
What percentage of college athletes in football and basketball do you think are actually attending class? Now, I did see the Duke. Did you see the Duke video that went viral? There was a girl after they had won advanced to the Elite Eight. She's like, let's see how many players show up. And 2 did show up. And one of them was Jared McCain. Like, they did. So some of them do go. But like, I think the trend is, and especially since COVID, but it's maintained, they are mostly online. So they are not going to classes.
This is something that Ohio State fans used to bitch about incessantly about some of the SEC schools. Like, hey, they don't have to go to class. Our kids do. Some of the SEC schools will negatively recruit Ohio State and say, like, Ohio State makes you attend class. Like, it's a bad thing. Whereas, like, these guys don't have to leave their dorm.
How dare they?
I know. Can you imagine this school is making you go to class?
Now I think that's largely been fixed. But I would say at most schools, most of them are not 100% online. Like, in many cases, there's still like one class you have to go to.
I think it falls on a public-private line. I think the private schools that already
Notre Dame goes to class.
Like the private schools that already have a 25-person class for most of their regular classes probably have a higher standard for your attendance. And, I was in a bunch of lecture hall classes. Attendance wasn't mandatory for me. It wasn't mandatory for the football players either. Just mandatory that we had to, turn in the assignments. And so how those assignments got done, hey, who knows? But I would say
this sucked. All right. Let me just put it this way, because I was in a lot of those auditorium classes too. And it was very hit or miss depending on the professor. There was a Theater 3000. I think it was Theater 3000 was the course. And it was a cakewalk course that had probably 500 kids in this huge auditorium the first day of the class. And then guess how many showed up the second day? It was probably 50. Like, it was like such a just weeding, like, boom. But the professor was very much a stickler for athletes. And so he actually took attendance for the athletes. We had to sit in the front and he marked the box. He was like, check, you're here. And if you weren't, you'd get a call from your position coach that afternoon, because that was who was in charge of attending class. And if you didn't show up, you were running. So like, even at some of the bigger schools back in the day, it's probably changed a lot. But even back in the day, it was like, no, you were an athlete. You had to attend class. Like, they were sticklers about it.
Not to take us on a tangent, because I know we got a pretty loaded show.
But
who is the last player that you guys can recall who was academically ineligible?
That's a great point.
I asked a guy
every player that didn't commit to my school didn't have the grades to get in, bud.
Dude, nowadays, I seriously think they just cook the books nonstop. Like, every recruit ends up qualifying, right? Yeah. Every kid who's like kind of questionable in spring magically makes the grades, and they're there. And it used to be there were like seriously good players who would miss a fall season because they didn't have grades. Who's the last guy we've heard about with that?
Or eligibility, like to get into
Emery
college. There were a lot of guys.
Mm-hmm.
How many guys had to go JUCO because they couldn't, get the ACT or SAT score and they couldn't do it? I mean, I have stories, but
now, I'm not talking about like, hey, like you couldn't cut it at Notre Dame. I'm talking about like missed the NCAA academic
Yes.
minimum to where you're
Right.
academically
What was it,
eligible.
700? I think 700 was the minimum SAT score.
Right. I guess John Emery at LSU was technically ineligible, but there was some other stuff there too.
But
Right.
to your point, I do think not stars, because they probably do cook the books for
I think
stars.
they took the books like crazy. With
I-
all these online classes.
At the beginning of fall camp, when we're checking in on some of these early coach availabilities, we will hear like, oh, why is so-and-so not here? And it's like, oh, he's, wrapping up second summer. He's got to get some things right on the academic side before we're ready for the fall. So I do feel like it does happen, but we only hear about it when they are on the way to getting it fixed and getting eligible once again.
And you've
I
got some
haven't
guys
been to
with bowl
class
games
in
too.
years.
Yeah.
The one thing I wonder if this does still happen in bowl games, and the kid, instead of being announced academically ineligible, is like, oh, I'm opting out of the bowl game.
Oh yeah, and transferring.
Because like I do like back when I just covered FSU, there were some guys on that 2014 team who I got told for sure like failed out, and they're like, oh, we're going pro, we're opting out, and they're like, yeah, you're like they just did not have the option to come back in terms of for the bowl game, like they didn't finish out the classes for the fall semester, but like for the full season stuff, it's very rare. I feel like it used to happen a lot.
Thank you. Is Blackboard still in the streets? I remember Blackboard.
If Warren Sapp is on your Blackboard, or what do they call it now? We got to have.
I don't know. No free advertising. Blackboard, hit us up.
Like it's probably like an
Blackboard
iPad,
advertise?
sort of electronic. It's probably some electronic thing, right? Like
No, Blackboard was
iPad.
the company. Like Blackboard was the company that had the classes. So you'd log onto your Blackboard. You'd have all your online classes. Canvas.
The chat says Canvas. Yeah.
All right. Before we hit the break and start to get into turnaround teams, but on Monday's show we didn't get a chance to get to it, but there is a lot of good camp buzz that's starting to bubble up from some of these spring camps. What are we hearing out of Columbus with that Ohio State, the Rock Stars, with all their new additions? How we think things are looking for the Buckeyes?
I think Jeremiah Smith is everything that they had hoped he would be. Which I think listeners of this show, even though we don't talk a ton of recruiting, we're like, hey, this is a guy to know like over a year ago. Just he looks like an NFL player playing high school. And he's sort of on that like Bo Jackson, DJ Williams. I think like he's one of the rare dudes I think an NFL team would actually use a pick on and stash him on their roster for a season and a half just to have the opportunity to have the rights to play him. Like I think he's that level of a guy at 18 years old. Geno Smith's just his nephew or cousin, the Seahawks quarterback, like really, really special player. He already got his black stripe pulled off, which is the fastest it's ever happened. Urban Meyer started that. Like you start with the black stripe and you pull it off and you get the whatever it is there on the helmet. He's freaky. So I think he's going to start for Ohio State.
Okay. I was going to say, so everything they expected. So what does that mean? Like, why like top 3 wide receiver, top 2 wide receiver, I
think he was better as a junior than Carnell Tate or Brandon Ennis were as seniors. So like, and those guys are a year older than him, but I think he's just a better prospect. We almost never put a wide receiver number 1 in the country. Like it was just unavoidable basically with that skill set. Also good vibes from Julian saying there. I did listen to the Bucknuts podcast. Awesome. All the Ohio State fans are probably already clued in on that. They still think it's going to be Howard, but Sayin is actually doing some good things. So,
insider scoop.
Ooh.
When I was in Chicago at my daughter's volleyball tournament, they got worked by the number 1 team in the country, who is from Columbus, Ohio. And one of the other dads of that team was Bobby Hoying, former Ohio State quarterback. We played against each other in the Senior Bowl. He was MVP. Not that I'm bitter about it. He got drafted ahead of me by the Eagles. Not that I'm bitter about it. He's a really good dude, though. So we met each other at a bunch of awards functions. And so I got to catch up with him. And I was like, man, your Buckeyes going all in. And he was funny because we talked about NIL, and he kind of confirmed the push that was out of Columbus as soon as Michigan, won the title. It was like, hey, we need to load up and get ready to make this push, which is a big reason why they're able to get these players. But echoing what Bud said about Julian saying, he was like, oh yeah, he's like, Sam looks pretty special. Because I started off by saying I think Will Howard could be a really good fit in Chip Kelly's system and running and what he can do. And he goes, but man, Julian Sayin looks like the real deal. So there's a lot of positive vibes coming around Sayin. And I will say this, Avery Johnson pushed Will Howard at Kansas State. Like there was a conversation about possibly making a move. There was that one game when they both split reps and Avery played really good. I'm like, I think he's going to be okay. And I think he could flourish, but there's also a piece of me that's like, man, if he was pushed by a true freshman there, why couldn't he be pushed by a true freshman at Ohio State too?
Remember a few years ago when Spencer Rattler was starting for Oklahoma and I was on the show always talking about how it should be Caleb Williams playing instead? I think I'm going to be doing that this year with Julian Sayin and Will Howard. Unless he gets off to a really good start, I think that's a take I'm sitting on right now. I'm laying claim to it.
I do think that Avery Johnson was going to beat out Will Howard, and I do think that Arnold was going to beat out Dylan Gabriel at Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, we get to see Sayin maybe in all 3 games.
Don't let him throw touchdowns. I will be obnoxious as hell.
If you play him a lot, like, you better be damn sure, though, because we also probably need to get reps for Devin Brown if they still believe in him, or maybe it's just lip service, or also
if Devin Brown is still there.
If Sayin's lighting it up this whole spring, and there's, it'll be curious to see how the depth chart is handled from Ryan Day. Does he,
One thing on this, like, Sayin is very polished for a high school kid. I think he's a mature mental approach, knows where to go with the ball. Like, it gets out quick. It's a pretty clean stroke. He is not a freak, either in terms of size, athleticism, or ball speed. So you do kind of want to see, like, can he create on his own at all a little bit? Like, Howard is very different in that way. I kind of doubt the practices that they're having right now are live shots on the quarterback. But to me, live bullets would be a differentiating factor with Howard because of the size and the ability to move. Whereas, like, Sayin's an 18-year-old and looks 18. Jeremiah is 18 and looks 24. There's a difference in 5-star freshmen. Yes, exactly.
And all 18-year-olds look 12 now anyway to me. So it's like,
baby faces.
Mm-hmm.
Other 5-star receiver, Kim Coleman, just killing it at Auburn. Just making circus catches on the regular. Like, that was kind of what he was known for, the ridiculous.
Because he has to.
Yeah, I know. Oh, good. You've got somebody who can, grab if it's a little bit off. That's
a little off target. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Off target receptions. This is a valued skill. Good job for Auburn.
Last one for me. I was reading on Horns 24/7. Trey Moore, which is not surprising because this guy was literally the player of the year in Conference USA. But he's kind of what he's cracked up to be as far as a top edge rusher transfer from UT.
Yeah, that was a Texas defense that got so much internal push from the defensive line, and that as you've got the absence of, the Murphy and Sweat, now you're going to need more on the edge. The more is going to be pretty special.
Oh, this just came on Twitter like 20 minutes ago. Riley Leonard is actually throwing at practice with a brace on his ankle. So I think that's a really encouraging sign.
That's a good sign. Going back to UTSA, though, like, that is the one thing that has stood out to me about that program in recent years. And I think it's why they were so successful right away in their first year in the American. Like, their line of scrimmage guys, especially when they were in Conference USA, just looked like they were playing a different sport than a lot of the teams they were going up against. Because I remember when they came to Champaign a few years ago and I saw that offensive line, I was like, that looks like a Big Ten offensive line as far as the size of the guys was concerned. So I'm not surprised. They've had really good players on that team.
100%. All right. Coming up on the other side, it's time to identify some of the teams that we think are set for a big turnaround or bounce back in 2024. We begin in the Big Ten next.
It's time for a little all-star college basketball.
It's the Reese's College All-Star Game, April 5th on CBS Sports Network.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, we have put together a collection of teams that we're expecting to have an improvement off their 2023 results. And so we're going to begin in the Big Ten with, hold on, I know somebody was in the tailgate early today. Yes, Brandon, we hear you. At 9:38 a.m., jumping in, getting the tailgate started. Brandon says, is Nebraska a turnaround team this year, or would you consider them turned around from last year? I think that if some of these, we might not all agree. Tom, our Big Ten aficionado, you think Nebraska is poised after a 5-7 season in 2023 for a big turnaround here in year 2 with Matt Rule?
Chip, there are some things that you could just set your watch to. It is April 3rd. It is snowing outside here in Chicago, and we are talking about, is this year Nebraska's good again? It's just every single year, this is what happens on April 3rd. I think that if you look at the situation, yeah, like I think there's a decent chance that they take a step forward. It's hard to say what the Big Ten is going to look like. So you can't make the same kind of assumptions that you have in years past based on, the Big Ten West, the Big Ten East, because you've got all these new teams coming in. But you look at the situation Nebraska has, the schedule is not a bear. I feel like last year, considering what they got from the quarterback position last year, they were about as good as you can hope for, just because the turnovers and all this kind of stuff, they kept putting themselves in holes. But defensively, I thought they were sound. I thought they had some good skill position players. I thought they were okay on the offensive line. So now you come back into the second year of Rule's tenure here, like you add in Raiola at quarterback. And I've talked about this before. I don't think he's a true freshman, so you should always temper your expectations. But I don't think he has to be great for Nebraska to take a significant step forward, considering how bad the QB play was there last year. So even if he's just like a below average Power 5 quarterback, I think Nebraska's got a chance to not get to the Big Ten title game or anything, but definitely get to a bowl game, which if you're Nebraska, it's been a while since you were to a bowl game. So just getting there, I feel like, is a significant step forward if they do it. And I think they can.
It's not foolproof, but just on a very basic level, you can just kind of sort teams that were like not good in close games, and then also run another column for like what was your turnover EPA in close games. And Nebraska was by far the worst Power 5 team in terms of turnover EPA loss. So expected points added in this case, expected points subtracted due to all of their turnovers. They were 1-5 in single score games. They don't even really have to be that much better of a team to achieve a better record, because the schedule is quite friendly. I mean, this is kind of I don't say this is the year for Matt Rule, because it's not, but it is an important year. Like, there is pressure on him to show some growth, because this schedule, to the extent that we can know what the Big Ten is a bit of a gift, right? Like, there are certain nobles. Guess what, guys? Ohio State's probably pretty damn good. Oregon's probably pretty good. Penn State, even if they don't get any better than they were last year, is still a really good team. And I have a hard time seeing Michigan drop off like significantly. And Wisconsin probably won't suck because Fickell's a good coach and they still have good players. So they miss a lot of those teams, which means you need to like win a lot of these coin flips, especially these coin flips that are in poor situations. O-line questions. They're putting a lot on Raiola if he's going to be the dude. I do love that they made that little change at offensive coordinator, so I'm encouraged by that. Man, it'd be hard to be worse. If they are, then you got major problems, because like you should win 7-8 ball games against this schedule.
Like last year, the whoopsie daisy rate on this team was the worst in the country by far. It was like 6.7%. And to put that in perspective, I think the average in the country was probably about 1.9. So they were about 3 times worse than the average team. So you also I've seen some comments in the chat about like the 1-score loss thing, because that has been the case in recent years for Nebraska. They've been really bad in 1-score games. But to me, just as anecdotal watching that team last year, I felt like in previous seasons, they kept losing 1-score games because of bad coaching. I think last year they were just losing 1-score games because they couldn't hold on to the football. I don't think coaching had anything to do with it. So I think there has been an upgrade in that department. And I think if you just do a better job of holding on to the football, it'll take care of those 1-score games.
I don't know. They did allow Jeff Sims to throw that Minnesota game. That interception he had was maybe one of the worst interceptions of the year, considering the situation. I am willing to go boldly out on a limb and say they go bowling. And they better. But like I'm with Bud. Like, I don't know if I'd go 8, but I think 7's reasonable, and I think 6 is hopefully the floor, because if it's not, then I do think you have bigger issues. And I just think if you look historically at what Matt Rule has done, like, I think you should see a jump in year 2, just players buying in to him, getting more of his fundamentals taught, the system more comfortable on both sides of the football. We saw the massive jump year 1 to year 2 from 1-11 to 7-6 in Baylor. That situation was way worse that he inherited. You saw that jump. And then the following season was when you saw the 11-1. So I think you'll see a better team than last year. So yeah, I think there'll probably be, 6 or 7 wins is probably where I feel more comfortable. If Raiola is special, then I think you're talking 8.
Oh, I'm so glad I didn't put this information in the doc so I can hit you with it off the top. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, make every moment more. Nebraska regular season wins 7.5. Over plus 134, under minus 164. Right now, all the win totals at this point are going to have crazy juice on either side, but 7.5 is the number.
I'd go under without
I have
seeing
to go
Raiola
under.
even in a spring game yet.
With the plus juice, I would go over.
Right. I mean, as like a value proposition when you're looking at the prices and the potential payoff, like I get that, but it is funny because I think Nebraska is a turnaround team because we will see Nebraska bowling. And I think taking that step is so important given the way that the Cornhuskers have struggled. However, I see the 7.5 and I'm like, oh, okay. So either 7-5 or 8-4. That is a big step. That is a big turnaround to go from where Nebraska has been to now all of a sudden being, one of the 8-win teams, one of the 8+ win teams in the Big Ten. That means you're probably, top half easily in the Big Ten.
I think if I'm a Nebraska fan and you look at the Big Ten this year, there's the team that's going to win the league, and then they're the at-large berth contenders. I think that's their own separate tier. I think Nebraska should be competing to be at the top of that second tier of teams where they're not really in the playoff picture, but you look at them as a solid Big Ten team.
Let's keep it right
you
there.
have Washington in year 2 or in tier 2.
Yeah, this
Yes.
year I do.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. We're on the same page, and there's kind of 4 at the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's keep it right there in the Big Ten. Indiana, 3-9 last season. Tom Allen is fired, and they go get one of the top coaches at the Group of 5 level. Curt Cignetti did such a good job taking that James Madison program, not only being able to compete at the top of the FCS as the Dukes had done, leading them into the Sun Belt. Just a great start to their FBS tenure. Danny, I know you were a Tom Allen guy, but you also, Curt Cignetti's been on the show too. We got a lot of love going on there. We've got Curtis Rourke showing up from the transfer portal, a few other portal additions as well that certainly show an increased commitment to trying to make Indiana football good. Do you see a turnaround for Indiana in 2024?
I think they'll be better. I think you'll see a initial bump. I do think Cignetti brings, I mean, he's out there banging drum big time that basketball game saying they're taking down Michigan, Ohio State. We can slow that down just a little bit, but I think you'll see a better football team. I think there's something to just the newness of somebody. Tom Allen, I thought he did a great job. I think it was similar. It was a great motivator, defensive-minded coach, but I do think there's an energy around Cignetti that kind of infuses a new life that will get you that initial bump, how far it goes. And then it's more of like, well, what's the ceiling for anybody at Indiana? And it's probably what you saw with Tom Allen in a COVID year when there weren't fans at a lot of games and there were some factors involved that gave you kind of an assist. And it's just one of those programs. Bud says it all the time. Somebody's got to take the losses. It does feel like Indiana is that program, but I think they'll be better than 3 wins.
They're going to be better than 3 wins in September.
Yeah, it should be.
I mean, they start out FIU, Western Illinois, at UCLA, host Charlotte, host Maryland. And then they go at Northwestern, host Nebraska, host Washington, at Michigan State, host Michigan, at Ohio State, host Purdue. I mean, they're only like big dogs twice.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is either favored or in theory winnable. So you basically transport the best of that JMU team over. Like that JMU team would have gone 6-6 against this schedule.
Oh, and the whole staff, by the way, too. I mean,
Yeah.
it is the JMU.
Elijah Surratt can play. The
Mm-hmm.
receiver they got from JMU, I think, is a really nice get. Part of this is like, does Curtis Rourke actually have the goods now?
Mm-hmm.
What is Curtis Rourke in 2024? Because last year he kind of looked like a shell of himself.
Yeah, that's really what this season is going to come down to for me with the Hoosiers. Is Curtis Rourke healthy? How well is he playing? How well is he performing in the Big Ten? Because there's talent on that roster. There was talent on that roster last year. I just feel like they kind of gave up the ghost a little bit. Like you go back to the opener against Ohio State and like they lost and they never really had a chance to win, but they made it really difficult for the Buckeyes
Penn
for the
State
most
game.
part.
You remember
the
that?
Penn State game. Like, they were not a pushover bad team. They just didn't have enough juice offensively, I think, to win most of their games. But I think if Rourke brings that, you talked about Surratt coming in. I think McCulley, the guy who also another big-bodied receiver for them who originally entered the portal and then came out and returned, like they've got weapons in that game, so or in that passing game. So if Rourke can stay healthy, this is a team that I think could flirt with a bowl game, but they're still, it's going to be difficult. But I do think they made the right hire, and I do think long term, like Kurt Cignetti knows how to build a program, and I think long term this is going to be a very solid hire for the Hoosiers. It's just how good they'll be this year will depend on the QB.
A little bit questions on their offensive line for me. Like they did lose some decent guys. What's his name went to Colorado, and then Carpenter went to Miami. The receivers they have are pretty damn good by Big Ten standard. They have whose receivers would be like snap call take over them? Ohio State, Oregon, probably Michigan if we count the tight end. I mean, they have top half of the Big Ten receiving core instantly, and if they get decent kind of quarterback play and any protection, there's enough games where the opposing defensive line just isn't any good to where like they're going to have time to chuck it around.
5.5.
I lean under, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I lean under with this one too, but with the coaching change, definitely one to keep an eye on, especially with all that portal action, both in and out.
Dude. Yeah.
So let's keep it in the Big Ten. One more here. The Michigan State Spartans. It was a tough season last year. Mel Tucker gets thrown off the carousel in September. You're kind of a lame duck season the rest of the way. You think that you're going to see these signs of life. I mean, I remember on the Locks pod, we kept coming back around and saying, maybe this is when they're playing for pride. And then Penn State pasted them. 4-8 by the end of the season. Jonathan Smith gets hired out from Oregon State. We have largely championed Jonathan Smith and the work that he did in Corvallis. Danny, how do you see Michigan State's outlook heading into next season?
I think this is probably one of the more challenging ones to do because I think when you talk Indiana, even Nebraska, you feel like you haven't seen it in a while. And it's kind of like hard to project where they are. Michigan State wasn't that far removed when they're paying Mel Tucker, $95 million because they were really good. And they were a team that could compete and be in that upper tier of the Big Ten. I think it's going to be way more challenging for Jonathan Smith. I think this is a program that is hurt by the new additions that are coming in from the Pac-12. I think where they fall in the Big Ten takes a step back until I'm proven wrong. I think talent-wise, what they're playing with, I think Jonathan Smith is a clear upgrade. But I just worry how they're going to do. And there's some early gotta-have-it type games for them if you do want to, go bowling in year one and kind of start turning this thing in the right direction.
Real quick follow on that one. So 4 new additions to the Big Ten from the Pac-12, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA. When you're talking, I agree with you. I think they're moving down. Do you see it as, 2 definitely above, and then you're fighting for space with the other 2? Like how do you see them sort of slide?
Yes, but I think right now as it stands, they're probably below and they have to claw their way into that tier, and they have to prove to me.
I think if right now I would put Michigan State in the UCLA tier. I would put Washington, Oregon, and USC above the Spartans at the moment.
I had Oregon and USC ahead, and then I had Washington and UCLA kind of in that same middle ground right there.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. For me, for the Spartans this year, again, this is another really good hire that I'm very high on. I think Aiden Childs is going to be a very, very important part to how good Michigan State is. And I think Jonathan Smith coming out right away and saying he's the starter, there's not going to be a competition, I think gives you an idea of what he thinks of Childs. And I think it's good for them to prepare for him to be the starter instead of, entertaining a quarterback battle. Problem for the Spartans is every single year, the secondary has been crap and the offensive line has been crap for a few years now. And you look at the skill positions they've had, there's a lot of dudes in the NFL right now who will soon be in the NFL who have been wearing a Michigan State uniform in recent seasons. Like Keon Coleman was at Michigan State. Jaden Reed was at Michigan State. They've had plenty of talent. They've had some decent talent in the front 7. But in the secondary, they've been awful. And offensive line, that was one thing, during the D'Antonio era, when they got to the playoff, when they were one of the best teams in the Big Ten, when they were winning the East, they were beating the hell out of teams on their offensive line. They haven't done that in 5 years. I can't remember the last time I watched the Michigan State offensive line and I thought, oh, that's a good unit. They're usually getting their butts kicked. So if I'm Jonathan Smith, you look at the Oregon State offensive line in recent years, pretty good. They're going to have a first-round pick at tackle this year in the draft from Oregon State, and I think that they did a good job developing there. I think if I'm Jonathan Smith, that is one of my biggest priorities as far as getting this program back to where it needs to be. But as for 2024, like I said, it's the same situation as Indiana. How good is Aiden Childs and how fast? If he is he could be, we've talked about the Big Ten quarterback. Who's the best quarterback in the league? We don't know. If Aiden Childs can be at least in the conversation as the best quarterback in the Big Ten, this Michigan State team could be pretty good. If not, they're probably going to be mediocre.
Yeah, first of all, Mahalzik there, who was at Oregon State, the O-line coach, now at Michigan State, like that guy can coach. Like he knows.
That's the biggest hire Smith or biggest coach he brought with him to me.
Totally, yeah. Like that guy is just universally respected. They do a great job. He's also the run game coordinator. My problem here is like if you swap the schedule with Indiana or with Nebraska, I've got Michigan State bowling easily.
Yeah.
The thing is, while Indiana and especially Nebraska got the easy side of the Big Ten coin, somebody has to get the hard side, and that somebody is named Michigan State. In a month's time, Ohio State at Oregon, host Iowa at Michigan. Hello. Like there is a bye in there, but that ain't easy. So now look, you should beat Florida Atlantic to open, but FAU has some athletes. Like you're not likely to lose to them, but if you play an absolute disaster of a game, like they jacked around with the sidelines game, Central Michigan last year for a little bit, like Central Michigan did for about 10 minutes and then they got it together. At Maryland in week 2 is like not super easy. September Maryland is a thing, and it's usually pretty damn good. Prairie View, that's a dub. At Boston College, like that's just annoying enough and just early enough to where you're not like a 10-point favorite at BC. I don't think. Host Indiana, at Illinois, host Purdue, host Rutgers. Like there is a real chance you could finish 4-0, but you're probably a slight dog at Illinois. So yeah, this schedule is not friendly for year one success, but it's hard. I would not say a great money-making strategy is consistently betting against Jonathan Smith. So like it's probably one like I may not bet the over, but I'm not loading up on the under, pending what happens with the transfer portal. And that's actually something I think we should say with all of these guys because that thing opens in about 2 weeks.
Great call. 5.5, by the way, is there's a lot of, I went through and got all the 3 and 4 win teams from last year. Then I also looked at the win totals, looked at the difference. This is a very small difference in terms of what your win total was last year, what your line is this year. 4 wins last year, 5.5 is the win total over at plus 124 as of earlier this week over on FanDuel Sportsbook. So yeah, if you want to say Jonathan Smith, that's my betting angle. And just go over 5.5. He'll figure out a way to get him to a bowl. I'm not going to hate it, but I don't know if I see enough on paper to be able to throw all my weight behind it at this point in the process. Coming up on the other side, we pivot from the Big Ten to the SEC. Plus, a lot of possibilities in the new look Big 12. And yes, is there a step forward coming for the Miami Hurricanes? We'll get into all that and more next.
You came down here to tell us that your date is missing.
I did not get ghosted. I think he was taken.
You were dating as a way to face your divorce. Was I really the only thing holding you together, D?
Damn.
Ready or not,
I am in search of a man with whom I had a beautiful connection.
you can't hide.
If anything feels off, we'll go. Off.
Murderer.
Who are you?
Diara.
Diara?
Find you.
Bud, did you put Texas A&M in here? Bud.
I did. Sorry.
Okay. I had no turnaround teams for the SEC. So make the argument. I don't know who's got to step forward. I see the Southeastern Conference with Texas and Oklahoma joining as everyone's in lockstep. You know, like I don't know where it's going for Arkansas. I see some teams that I think are going to get worse. I see the structure mostly in place. So sell me on the Aggies as a turnaround team.
All right, which team in the SEC could have the largest? If you had to bet, which team in the SEC has the biggest improvement in quarterback play this year?
Oklahoma.
Tennessee.
Oh, Tennessee.
I think it's A&M. Like, you give me full Connor Wegman only threw 119 passes. Like, you give me a full season of Connor Wegman, to me, that's a much, much bigger jump than like the Max Johnson, Jalen Henderson, Marcel Reed stuff they were trotting out there. And I don't think Joe Milton's any good. Like, I do believe in Nico, but I mean, Joe Milton's probably going to get drafted. Like, Max Johnson, by my numbers, maybe they're just not catching up to this. Like, he's secretly good, but I was very not pro Max Johnson. So I think that A&M, among like the teams that are bowl competitive, I guess there's some chance Mississippi State's better as far as quarterback play year over year. But I think A&M has the real good shot to have a lot better quarterback play because I think Wegman, he does have some serious tools. They also have a really friendly schedule. And I thought they did a nice job in the transfer portal. Like, Nick Scorton, I think, is the best edge rusher in the transfer portal. Like, that guy's a real dude. The schedule is pretty easy by SEC standards. Have you guys looked at this? It's like, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they made the playoff. I'd be a little surprised, but I mean, Notre Dame.
Bud predicts Texas A&M to the playoff.
Actually, that's some great content right there.
Yeah, can you just say that again? Nice.
Can you say that again? Yeah.
I would be surprised, but not shocked if Texas A&M does make the playoff. There you go. That's soundbite.
Yeah, that was good.
At Florida, Bowling Green, Arkansas, Missouri. Okay, Missouri's pretty good, but it's in College Station. At Mississippi State, host LSU. At South Carolina, New Mexico State. At Auburn, host Texas. Their 4 roadies are 4 of the 6 worst teams in the SEC by my projections. Florida, Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Auburn. You got a lot of your coin flip type games come to College Station. I don't hear Alabama called. I didn't hear Georgia called. I did hear Texas. I didn't hear Tennessee. Like,
I think this, the only thing that concerns me, this will be the 3rd year in a row we're hearing about Connor Wegman being potential, right? And we haven't seen him finish a season yet. And we've seen him play pretty well against lesser competition. But, I mean, you got to pick somebody to project. You got to project somebody to be good. And I do think Colin Klein, being the offensive coordinator, was one of the more significant hires across, the country as far as a coordinator coming in. I think he could actually, help Connor Wegman a lot as a play caller. They've been very active in the portal, the number 2 class in the transfer portal. So I get on board somewhat. And I mean, you make a really good point about the schedule, especially the home games early. If you catch that momentum and that Mike Elko era starts off on the right foot, we know about the home field advantage. Could be.
I'm just picturing Lucci's ears like perking up because he just heard Bud somewhere say that Texas A&M could make the playoffs. So he's efforting to get you on the show right now. I could see it, but I'm kind of more with Danny on this one. Like it's more of a I need to see it because I've heard the same kind of thing about Wegman. But I do love the coaching hire. I do think Mike Elko is. So it's like I have faith in A&M. It's just I don't know if we're going to see a huge step forward. But that's also because it's not like they have a lot of room to make a big step forward. Because while they've been disappointing by their standards and their expectations, it's like we've been talking about Nebraska, we've been talking about Indiana, teams that aren't getting to bowl games. Texas A&M's not there. Like it's still a very talented team. But yeah, I don't think they're going to be competing. Or they could compete for a playoff berth. It's just I need to see it before I can really kind of hop in there. It's just Aggie fatigue, I guess.
Last year, like they ended up pushing against Ole Miss, if I recall, and like that was a game that was pretty ridiculous. They the one DN nut punched the Ole Miss offensive lineman, and that kind of turned the game a little bit. They actually hung kind of tight with LSU in Tiger Stadium for longer than was comfortable if you were betting LSU in that game, if I was. So now, eventually LSU pulled away, but they kind of showed some glimpses like, all right, like there's a little something here. They're still fighting. There's still some NFL talent on this roster.
Are the Aggies and Longhorns playing on Thanksgiving next season?
I think, is it Thanksgiving or Black Friday? I think it might be Thanksgiving. I think you might be right.
I hope that like that's a game for a playoff berth. Can you imagine like the first meeting between those two in however many years at this point, and there's like a playoff spot on the line? Oh God. So now, yes, I want the Aggies to be competing for a playoff spot. Very much.
Them playing in the playoff, that would rip a hole in the space-time continuum. Like, I didn't think that we would make it through North Carolina and Duke in the Final Four, but we did barely, but like, I don't know if we could do Texas and Texas A&M with like a national championship type stakes on the line. That'd be too much. FanDuel Sportsbook, make every moment more. Over under 8.5 wins. Plus 114 to the over, minus 142 to the under. So if they are a 9-3 team,
they're in the conversation.
They are in the conversation. Yeah.
Plus 114?
Plus 114 to the over.
If they're in that conversation, does it matter who the 9 wins and 3 losses are against? I mean, it feels like they got to beat Notre Dame, right? You have a non-con, or do they?
Because they don't have the reason to think that they can win 9 games is that they're not playing the kind of teams that would win the tiebreaker discussions for an at-large spot.
Right.
If you do, you almost have. The problem is if you beat Notre Dame and you're still 9-3, it means you have 3 SEC losses, which means you're probably.
And they don't play Georgia. They don't play Alabama. Yeah. Like, they don't have good losses on there. But it is the SEC, so.
You got to Louisville this thing, and you got to beat Notre Dame, take advantage of your weak schedule, and backdoor your way into the SEC title game.
Correct. Yeah, like you only have 1 regular season SEC loss. You go and you lose to Georgia in the title game. That's your 3rd loss within the SEC. So you're more like 10-3. Yeah. 9-3 implies they don't make it to the title game. So that is a little tougher to get to.
But it will be very interesting to see how things go. Tom, I'm with you. Like, Jay Bateman as defensive coordinator, you're kind of like, man, there's sensible hires on both sides of the ball. It's like Mike Elko's good at this or something.
Better than DJ Durkin.
Yeah,
I think that's an upgrade.
You know how you see teams go from players coach to hard asses and then back and forth. I feel like Texas A&M kind of did the same thing where it went from overhyped to actually just good ball coaches everywhere.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We are going to have a new look Big 12, and gracious, there is a lot of movement that is available as we are welcoming in the 4 corner schools to a conference that already was just getting used to, having Cincinnati, having UCF, having Houston, having BYU. I mean, this is a brand new landscape. So, what do you think the ceiling is? But I'll throw to you first. Utah was 8-5 last season. They were, for little spurts, competitive against the very best teams in the conference, the same way that we were expecting Utah to be. They beat USC because that's what Utah does under Kyle Whittingham. What do you think the ceiling is for the Utes as we look into 2024?
I mean, in some spots, they're favored to win the Big 12. A lot of this depends on Cam Rising. We haven't really seen him in about a year and a half, but if Rising is actually healthy and looking good, Utah is one of those teams that was just sneakily injured last year. I mean, their injury report was almost impossible to really keep track of. I tried my best. And it was like every week, it's like, who the hell is this new guy? This is crazy. And Whittingham's like, we have a cloning machine over here, so we're actually going to be okay, just not optimal level of Utah. And they still. That game against Colorado was insane. It was like Utah QB5 against Colorado QB2, who's basically like a QB5 anywhere else.
Was that the Pig Farmer game?
Mm-hmm. Yes. No. Right? The Pig Farmer was out. Pig Farmer beat USC.
Yeah, Barnes was their 3rd or 4th QB.
Yeah, this was like they did lose Lamani Dumuni last night. I saw on Twitter that Steve Bartle of 24/7 Sports had that. Who's one of their linebackers, but they just have so many guys back who I think could have gone pro had they had a nice 2023 season, but they didn't because they all got injured. So, I mean, they're kind of my Big 12 favorite right now.
Same. I mean, I think they could win the Big 12. I think that I just have a lot of faith in Kyle Whittingham and that staff knowing what they do year in and year out. And they were beat to hell last year. They had a lot of injuries. So even if they just get normal injury luck and things balance out in that league where there is no elite team, I think Utah right off the jump could prove to be the best of the bunch next year. So I do think that's their ceiling, Big 12 champion playoff berth.
Kyle Whittingham is maybe one of the most underrated coaches. I think we say this every single year. They're always overlooked. They were in a conference and overlooked where people had significant advantages over them. Now they go to a league where they should come in with better resources than a large portion of the teams they're competing against. Why wouldn't we say there should be a big step forward again? Like again, you kind of have to trust the history of what you've seen with this program.
Mm-hmm.
9.5 is our win total, but we are juiced to the over, -122 to the over, +100 to the under over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Where's Isaac at? I know Isaac's always in the tailgate. Isaac's been waiting for us to talk about the Cyclones. All right. So Iowa State in 2023 went 7-6, but no one who got their eyes on Rocco Becht is going to sit here and say that the future ain't bright for the Cyclones. Now, we've got some staff changes that, of course, we're going to take note of. And, we got to take stock of, how this team is going to be able to flip the results in close games, 1-3 in close games, as you see here on the screen. Danny, where are you at with Iowa State, a program that now we've just kind of gotten used to Matt Campbell? We were trying to move Matt Campbell on to the next good job for a long time. Now he's just kind of there at Iowa State. And I think that this is a season where in a reset Big 12, Iowa State fans are looking for a step forward. Do you see it in the cards?
I like Rocco Becht. I like his dad a lot, Anthony. Lost their offensive coordinator. This is one of those situations. I don't even like to say this because I don't like feeling like you're picking on certain programs, but I felt like Matt Campbell probably should have left after that run they had. Like, go back and look at the past 25, 30 years of Iowa State football, and it's a whole lot of 6-win seasons or worse. And I just wonder if they can recapture that 3 or 4 year run they had when they were 8+ and they were a very, very trendy pick to make the playoff a few years ago. I think it's a challenging place to win. I think you'll see more of the same of what you've seen the last couple of years. Is that unfair? Is that too harsh?
No, it's pretty grounded, actually. Like, that's really what that program is typically. When they do overachieve, I think it's a nice combination of quarterback, which they seem to have in Becht. And we can at least assume he has some base level of talent because he's beating out J.J. Cole, who a lot of teams did like and stuck with Iowa State. Experience, like, this team returns a ton of experience. They seem to have good buy-in. Like, they held on to Dom Orange, who's like a really, really nice, especially by Big 12 standards, like really nice nose guard. He didn't hit the portal. Like, I'm reading into that. It's like, okay, like, they got really nice players who will probably play in the NFL who are still buying in. And the schedule's like not that bad. I also think this team was better close to the end of the year than it was early in the year, especially with the whole gambling investigation stuff they had to overcome.
First of all, I haven't seen Isaac in the chat since last week, since the Cyclones got knocked out of the tournament by the Illini because they just weren't good enough. And then I don't remember what happened in the Elite Eight after that. I blacked out, but it's just clearly he's been embarrassed ever since because he was talking a lot of trash. As for the football team that Isaac supports, like, I'm kind of with you guys. Like, I don't have, like, in the Big 12, again, there's room for anybody to step up and have a big year, I think. It's just, I don't know if I'm buying in on the Cyclones. I think that they are a rock solid team. They are not a team that really strikes me as elite. I do like Becht. I do like the coaching staff. I think they've done a good job. I know their fans are really high on Abu Sama, their running back, but he was somebody who was getting 7 carries a game last year. He is not like a feature every down back. Yeah. If he becomes more of a bigger role in that offense, does he have the same kind of production, or is it just, so there are questions I have that they need to be answered, but it's like, the bottom's not going to fall out on this program. They're going to get to a bowl game. It's just how much better than 7-5 are they going to be? Are they going to be 8-4, 9-3? If they get some fumble luck, if they get some injury luck, if they win some coin tosses, for sure they can. It's one of those things where you're going to have to rely on getting lucky in some of these spots for Iowa State to hit that ceiling.
Who are your bottom 5 teams in the Big 12? Just off top of the dome. Arizona State, Cincinnati, BYU, Colorado, and
Baylor.
Those are my 5. They only dodge. I think they only play one of those. No, 2. They get Baylor and they get Cincinnati. They don't get Colorado. They don't get BYU.
I don't think the margins for the bottom of the Big 12 are the same as other conferences. And while they might be the bottom 5 teams, I just think that they are, that bottom pack that you just rolled off are much closer to the middle tier than you have in other conferences.
Fair. Can we flip it though? Like there's a defined top for us. Like Kansas State, Utah, Kansas, they have to play all 3 of those.
That's
and then they
less
also
than
get Texas Tech. They also
but
get
still, we're
UCF.
talking about Kansas as a top tier team in a power conference. Like,
I was
this
about
is-
to say,
Exactly.
can we? But I know he just got a new contract, but I hope Lance Leipold clips that and goes and asks for a raise, because we were asked name the 5 worst teams in the Big 12, and even before we put them in the top tier, Kansas wasn't one of the 5 worst. Like, you look at the history, that is just the job Lance Leipold has done. So yeah, he should probably go ask for another raise.
Like a month ago, we did the exercise, like how many teams can win the Big 12, and I think we came up with like 9 out of the 16
Yeah, it was 9 or 10
are conceivable. Yeah,
7
schedule's
and a
like
half.
not crazy easy.
Yeah, 7.5 is our win total, plus 116 to the over. That seems high.
Under, I think 7 and 5.
Same.
Yeah,
That seems sensible. All right, we are getting crunched for time, so I'll just say, Tom, you get to pick Baylor, Cincinnati, or Colorado. Who's interesting among that group as a turnaround team?
Gee, Baylor, Cincinnati, or Colorado? Which one's interesting? Huh? I think I'll go with Colorado. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. Warren Sapp's there now, so you have to expect there'll be a 7-win jump at minimum. But it's like, this is going to be a key. Like, there is, forgetting the personnel, forgetting all the off the field stuff. Like, Dion now has spent a year as the head coach at Colorado. He's going into year 2 as well. Like, this is his more experienced kind of, he knows what to deal with. Do we see an improvement from him as far as being a coach and a leader of the program, and not just as a brand kind of, front forward facing CEO selling the program? Do we see him grow as a coach? Do we see Shadur grow as a player? Because Shadur is talented, but he has flaws and he needs to work on them. So we need to see that happen. We need to see if that offensive line can improve. We need to see if they can get anything from that defense, because that's one of the things we didn't talk about a ton last year, but that defense was not exactly doing them many favors itself. Travis Hunter, can he stay healthy? Because we haven't seen him be able to do that for a full season. He took that shot last year, missed time. If he's going to still be playing both ways, can he stay on the field for every single game? Because he is the best player on that team. And if Colorado is going to take a step forward, Travis Hunter needs to be on the field as much as possible and live up to that hype. So it's a very interesting team. We will hear a lot about them either way. There is a chance they take a step forward, but there's also a chance things are exactly the same.
So they went 0-6 to close the season. They start 4-2. They went 0-6. But in reviewing that path, they played some close games, some close lower scoring games against some good teams. And I remember being very, obviously confused by that based on the way that things had started, based on, the way that team absolutely could not get a stop to save its life against Stanford in that game that, basically defined the heartbreak and the disappointment that would follow from the Buffs. But when you're hanging in there against Oregon State, when you're playing Arizona, to a 1-score game, and then obviously Utah, shell of itself, but the cloning machine was working. I think it is interesting to go into that 0-6 finish and look at those small margins. And if we're going to point to all the times that these other teams that we've got on the turnaround teams were able to flip it, Tom, maybe some of those marginal improvements can help Colorado be able to flip some of those results as well.
But you know what I hear when you were going over the games that they were close in and the games they couldn't get stops in? Feels like a team that gets up for the big games and doesn't pay much attention to the details when they're playing the teams they think they're supposed to win.
That is a valid criticism. I
do feel like there was some garbage time points too that made some of those games close. Like USC was pretty comfortable in that game, and they kept.
Oh, I didn't
41-7, wasn't it at halftime?
Yeah,
like UCLA that's probably the most dominant 12-point win you're ever going to see as far as physically whipping somebody. That was insane. So here's the problem. Guys, their final 4 games at Texas Tech, host Utah, at Kansas, host Oklahoma State. Like you better be bowl eligible by Halloween. Just saying.
That's fair. That's tough.
And they get North Dakota State in the non-conference.
They got a great quarterback. They got a great athlete.
They got Warren Sapp.
They got Warren Sapp. It's just hard to trust And I would love to be wrong. It's great. I think people, come at Bud, they come at me for being haters of Colorado. It would be fantastic for business if Colorado is 9-10 win team. I mean, if they were in the playoff conversation, it'd be great for us. I just don't know how you trust. There was a lot of dysfunction last year. There's a lot of things. I know some people say, well, he's doing it the way never been done before. And you're right, but it's never worked before either. And it came unraveling rather quickly. There's a ton of turnover again on the roster, a ton of turnover again on the coaching staff. I just don't know how you trust it and say, yeah, that's going to work great. I think there'll be some exciting moments, just like there were last year. There'll probably some upsets in there, just like there were last year. But I think when it all comes, do they go bowling? Which should be celebrated as a success. I know they won't. And then, the haters, because there are a lot of haters, will come out there and, poke the bear and make fun of them. But I think that's a step in the right direction of what you want for your program. I don't know how you can trust it other than believing, which is what Deion sells you on. You got to believe. And I can't live on that.
Do you believe?
Enough to take the over 5.5 at FanDuel Sportsbook. -115 to the over, -105 to the under. I mean, buddy, you want to talk about a great proposition and just throw out there for college football fans. Will Colorado make a bowl by even-ish money on each side? Just let the chaos reign.
I just did the math. That equals more than 100%.
FanDuel, post the playoff odds. I mean, we got teams like Auburn listed on the potential playoff odds.
Right?
Colorado, post them. Come on, FanDuel. Come on. Like we got other teams that have just as good of a shot.
Oh, you want the yes, no? Oh, you want to get Colorado? Yes.
I want Washington. Like we got Washington. Yes, no. Like Colorado's got a better shot to make the playoff than Washington does, right?
All right. Before we get out of here. Before we get out of here, we've got to hit the Miami Hurricanes, because while they were a bowl team last season, no one's happy about it. I mean, there is no way that through 2 years of the Mario Cristobal era, the celebrated hire, bringing them in, the native son, they are, over the last 2 seasons, including bowl games, a sub 500 program. Danny, see a step forward for the U in 2024? Is this a turnaround team?
I think so. Cam Ward, I do think, is a difference maker. We talked a lot about him when he was on the open market, and I was, Florida State was in the mix. I thought that would have been a really good solution for them. They bowed out. Miami won the winner in those sweepstakes. I do think he's a difference maker. There better be a big jump. This is the year too. Florida State question marks. Clemson, are you buying in? You're really a believer in them. With some of the question marks, they showed vulnerability the last couple years. North Carolina losing a lot. Duke, who was a team that was tough to beat. They, who knows what's going to be with Manny Diaz. NC State might be a tricky, Louisville. Are they going to be the same team they were last year? There's just a lot of question marks. The door is open for Miami to walk through it and say, this is the time where we get headed in the right direction. I think the quarterback helps a ton, and I think it better be for Mario Cristobal, because there are going to be some restless Miami Hurricane fans if it's not. But I'll buy in. I'll say there is a jump forward.
Reports out of spring are pretty good. I was listening to David Lake on the Through the Smoke podcast, our 24/7 Sports Miami site, and he said a pretty good chance that Cam Ward is the best quarterback they've had since Ken Dorsey.
Ooh.
Now, that's A, high praise, because it's been 20-something years.
We're also having a great list.
Okay, yeah. So who is currently the best quarterback Miami has had since Ken Dorsey?
I think Ja'Cory, as a college quarterback, not as a NFL prospect, but Ja'Cory Harris as a college quarterback was pretty awesome.
Or
Brad Kaya as a freshman.
Brad Kaya as a freshman was really good too.
So,
get everything after.
He's probably right that Cam Ward's the best quarterback they've had in 20 years.
Stephen Morris?
Morris was solid.
Yeah.
TVD as a freshman. Any freshman year quarterback they had was great.
That 6-week run that TVD had was really good.
You got to finish your career there to be considered in this conversation, don't you? You can't transfer out and get kicked to the curb.
I think that's probably fair. Receiver still have Restrepo. Horton apparently is stepping up. We'll see, to replace to replace Colby Young, who went to Georgia.
But Jacoby George is good.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like Restrepo George, if Horton actually is a true outside guy, and a big body guy who can play, like tight end, they feel really good about Elijah Lofton, the stud freshman they got. They're actually using him at running back right now, so I think that speaks to their need to go get a running back in the transfer portal, because I know the guy's athletic, but he's still a freshman tight end, so I don't know about playing him at running back. Linebacker Maui Noah was an absolute hit for them. He's back. They think Basaint is taking a big jump. Like Ruben Bain might be the best D lineman in the conference. Mesidor, they're kind of like slow playing this spring, apparently. They think he'll be good to go for the fall. We'll see what they do in the portal. Like secondary is a question for me overall, but I mean, the schedule's not that difficult. Are they favored in every game?
Well, let me tell you right now that over at FanDuel Sportsbook, they've got the over-under set at 9.5.
Yeah, if you look at their schedule, like they open at Florida, but I'm not nearly as worried about that game as I probably should be. You know what I mean? Like compared to where Florida's supposed to be, compared to the Florida you're going to get, I think that's, not an awful game. But their road schedule by and large is not that difficult. At Florida, at USF, at Cal, at Louisville, at Georgia Tech, at Syracuse. There's no game on their road schedule where you look at it and be like, oh, they've got no shot in hell of winning that game. So I think when it comes to Miami, we know they're talented. We also know the elephant in the room about whether it's going to work or not. Like, they lose a lot of close games, and I don't think it's by coincidence. It's by mistake. And if I'm Miami, I hope I'm ahead multiple scores in the fourth quarter all the time, because if I'm not, I get worried about their late game management and how they handle things, how they turtle up. So it's like, if I'm the Hurricanes and I'm a Miami fan, get us up by 3 to 4 scores by halftime. Get us up, by 2 scores in the third quarter, and then just hold on to the ride in the fourth.
I mean, I had them favored in all 12 games. Even if they Mario a game or two, that's still 10-2. Like, that's still much better than the 7-5 they were regular season last year.
They have not one, but 2 huge games in the state of Florida the first month of the season. Do not sleep on the South Florida game. That was one where they'll be up. We saw their quarterback, what he can do. He's a young, talented player. That's South Florida's Super Bowl. If Miami does win that Florida one, like, that could be one where they take them a little bit lightly. But like, if they get both of those, then you're off and running. Then you got like Virginia Tech at home. Like, some good. The schedule sets up pretty well. They just got to make it through that month of September.
What do things
this
look
is
like
actually
if
kind of
the opener?
They're livid.
Yeah, and that's what is. But do you?
What is the line? Is it less than a field goal, right? Like, it's a tight line, right?
I thought it was like 5, but maybe not. Maybe it's 3. There's some interesting games for all 3 of your. I guess UCF's Power 5 now too, but like, I think in the minds of a lot of fans in Florida, they're still kind of, working their way into that status mentally. Like Miami at USF, Florida playing UCF, Florida State is an out-of-state school, but like Memphis, like lower level programs that like can and will score. Like, your offense is going to have to be going, because like Memphis is going to have a really good offense. USF's going to have a very good offense. UCF will probably still score a heck of a lot of points. And none of those teams play a lick of defense. So you're probably going to, like, one of those, or maybe more of those teams are going to have to win like a 50-35 type shootout, or 40-28 type thing.
The Miami Hurricanes currently, if you want to make a wager on the ACC Conference Championship game winner, your co-favorites are Clemson and Florida State at plus 280. Your next option on the odds board, the Miami Hurricanes at plus 450. Louisville joins in that sort of top tier at plus 500. Then you take a drop down to NC State and Virginia Tech, both at plus 1,000 or longer odds. So a win total of 9.5. Third on the ACC title odds board. The projections from the odds makers is that, yes, this will be a big step forward. Now it is a rivalry that has been going on for a long time, and that is Miami against expectations. Can't wait to see how this goes this fall. Anything else? Any other teams we want to highlight before we get out of here? We went long.
I don't know I don't have time to highlight. Pitt and Syracuse are probably the other 2 within the ACC that I think have a pretty good shot to improve their records.
Yeah, Pitt 3-9 last year, 2024 win total of 5.5. Syracuse was a good call. I mean, You've got a lot of new
Don't
talent.
play a tight end at quarterback is a hell of a
That'll help.
and the schedule's a cakewalk.
Yeah, and Aronde Gadsden staying healthy. Remember, he got knocked out last year, so now he's back. Should be a big one. All right.
Also, Illinois going from 5-7 to 12-0 is a pretty big step forward.
I mean, that is.
But that's not a turnaround as much as it is just like a return,
An ascension.
An ascension to
Yeah.
expectations. I saw from G-Sip in the tailgate asked about mailbag tomorrow. You are absolutely right. We will also spend a little bit of time at the beginning of the show pointing out some of the things we'll be looking at for the weekend spring game action. Most of our Auburn and Clemson conversation, I think we will hold until Monday when we're on the other side of those spring games and we've got a little bit more to chew on, a little bit more information to dig into. But yes, we will be getting in to the big old bag of mail, where if you leave us a 5-star review and in that review you put your mailbag question, we'll tackle it in a future mailbag episode. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at BudElliott3. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See ya.